A few months ago, we were out with our son, and my husband Martin had him in the baby carrier. And then an older woman passed us on the street and came up to us and said, "Aw, such a cute baby. Are you the mother?" And we were in a group, and she didn't know that he and I were together, but she just didn't really assess the situation. There was a very small baby, no woman visibly attached to him, and her brain filled in the rest. But Martin confidently said no, and then just kind of laughed it off. I actually talked about that moment in a recent German video, which I'll link below, but the short version is this. I don't think it says much about Germany today. In our experience, a man with a baby here is usually just a man with a baby. Nobody stops you. Well, she did, but nobody makes it a huge event. A man pushing a stroller or picking up his kid from Kita is a completely normal sight. And that part is genuinely different from what I grew up seeing in the US, but that is not the same as saying Germany has figured it out. Fathers here still get treated like heroes for doing normal parenting. WhatsApp groups are still mostly moms at the end of the day. Emergency contacts or school often default to the mother. And Vatertag, which is literally Father's Day, is traditionally an excuse to go hiking and drinking with your friends all day, while the kids are presumably somewhere else. So yes, visibility has changed, but the underlying assumptions are still catching up. The woman was probably in her 70s, and for her generation, the generation of our parents, a man carrying a baby close to his body was apparently something she had genuinely never seen. She said as much. I don't think she's an outlier. I think she's just the most visible end of a spectrum that still exists. And honestly, that spectrum doesn't really scare us. The question I can't actually stop thinking about isn't from someone on the street. It's not from someone who grew up in a different era or is just catching up. It's from our son. Where's my mom? And that one, Martin and I have been preparing for since before our son existed. And here's the thing about having a baby through surrogacy. It takes a long time. Our journey was 3 years from the moment we decided to do this to the moment our son was born. 3 years. And if you've been following this channel from the beginning, you've actually seen some of that time. The waiting, the matching process, the uncertainty, the heartache. We have a full playlist of the whole journey linked below if you want to go back to the beginning. And one of the things that happens when you have that much time, when there's no baby yet, no due date, just this open horizon, is that you think about everything. You think about the nursery, sure. You think about names. Oh, that was a big discussion for us. You think about practical things, but you also think about the harder stuff, the questions you're going to face as a family, the conversations you'll have to have. And one of the things our son may one day ask when there's no script in front of us. And the one that kept coming back over and over was this: what do we tell our son about his mother? Because the honest answer is this: it's complicated. Not emotionally complicated for us, but structurally complicated. Our son has 2 women who played a role in his existence, and they are 2 completely separate people. There's our gestational carrier, the woman who carried our son. She grew him in her body for 9 months and, of course, gave birth to him. She, however, has no genetic connection to him whatsoever. And then there's his genetic mother, the woman whose DNA he carries. The technical word you'll often hear for that role is egg donor. We chose a semi-anonymous agreement, which means we know who she is, we know where she lives. She lives in California. So we have 2 women, 2 completely different roles. And one day, our son may ask us a very simple question. We've been ready for it for a while now. Before I go further, a quick note on language. In German, we use specific terms for both of these women. We say Tragemutter, literally carrying mother, for the woman who carried him. And we say genetische Mutter, genetic mother, for the woman whose DNA he carries. We chose both of those terms deliberately. In English, the broader topic is usually, of course, called surrogacy, and the specific person who carries a pregnancy is often called a gestational carrier. For the genetic side, people often use the word egg donor when they're talking about the arrangement technically, but the language we actually come back to is more specific. Our gestational carrier, his genetic mother. That distinction matters to us because some common English phrases blur two separate roles into one, when in our son's story, those roles are completely separate. And the words matter because they are a part of how we will eventually explain his origins clearly to him. If you want a full video on why we use these terms, let me know in the comments because there's a whole conversation behind that. And in real life, at the doctor, at school, wherever our son needs to explain this to someone, he'll probably use the German terms. But inside our family, we'll talk about these two women by their names. The terms are for explaining. The names are for knowing. Here's what we decided. I'll walk you through it the way we think about it because it's not one answer, it's a layered answer. It changes as our son grows. When he's small, 3, 4, 5, we'll start with what's most concrete to him. We'll show him pictures, we'll tell him about our gestational carrier, the woman who carried him, and helped bring him into the world. We might say something like, oh, you were a tiny baby, you grew in her belly, see, and you can point to it, and she helped Daddy and Papa bring you into the world. That she was kind, that she was strong, that she helped us create our family in a way that we are deeply grateful for. At that age, I think that's enough. It's true, it's complete, and not every layer at once. But a toddler doesn't need every layer at once. They need the truth in a size they can hold. But kids grow, and as our son gets older, his genetic mother becomes more important. Who does he look like? Where does he come from? What is the family history? That's when we bring her in more fully. She's not unknown to us. She's not a secret. She's not someone we've been hiding. She's someone we've always known about. She lives in California, and we can tell him that. We will tell him that. And this matters more than it might sound. One day our son may be sitting, in a doctor's office, and someone may ask about his family medical history, and he will be able to answer. He will be able to talk about his genetic mother's health history without having to stop and explain the whole origin story first. That kind of quiet, practical dignity is something we thought about carefully. There won't be any, oh, we'll talk about it later when you're older, as a way of avoiding the topic. We definitely don't believe in that. What we want is honesty at every stage and an age-appropriate way. And here's the part I think about a lot, the power structure. We made a specific decision about our son's relationship with his genetic mother. He is allowed to contact her, but she's not allowed to contact him. And that's intentional. It's a protection. It puts the decision entirely in his own hands and on his timeline. Maybe when he's 14, he couldn't care less, but maybe when he's 22, he wants to know everything. Maybe he never does, I don't know, that's his choice to make. We didn't want to give him a situation where someone could just show up in his life uninvited before he's ready. So we built the boundary deliberately and we put our son at the center of it. And before I get to the part of this I think about the most, if you're new here and want to understand the full journey that led to this moment, we have a complete surrogacy series from the very, very beginning right here on our channel, all in one playlist, link below. It gives a lot of context as to why we thought about all of this so carefully. Now, will there be moments that are just weird? Well, yeah, probably. We follow a gay couple on Instagram, and for a few weeks, their child started calling one of them mom. I think he picked it up at daycare, heard other kids use the word, and tried it on. And they panicked a little, the way you do when something unexpected happens. And then a few weeks later, it just dropped. He moved on to the next thing kids move on to. But, language is how kids make sense of the world. They try words on, they test them. Sometimes they keep them, sometimes they don't. And if you're watching this as a parent, I'm curious, have your kids ever tried on a word or a role that surprised you? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely love to know how other families handle these kind of small moments. Here's something else we think about a lot. Our son is growing up in a heteronormative world. The vast majority of what he's going to hear and see at Kita, at school, in books and movies is going to be about mothers and fathers. He'll probably make a Mother's Day card at some point. He'll definitely watch Disney movies where the whole story turns on a mother's absence or presence. That's just the world he's in, and we're not going to pretend otherwise. So we made a conscious decision to find books that actually reflect our family, not just books that show all kinds of families in a general way, although those are important too, but books specifically about two dads. We went looking for them. They're not always so easy to find, but they do exist and they're on a shelf. And honestly, I think every parent should read diverse family stories to their kids, not just families like ours. A child with a mom and dad also benefits from seeing that other families look different. It normalizes the whole spectrum before anyone has to explain it. Which brings me to something I genuinely appreciate about raising a family here in Germany. In our experience, our son is going to grow up in an environment where our family is not treated as shocking. At Kita, different family structures are just part of the room. Whether two moms, two dads, one parent, grandparents helping to raise the kids, adopted families. It's not always perfect, of course, but it feels ordinary in a way I don't take for granted. In America, depending upon where you live, gay families are still debated like they're a proposition on a ballot. You have all those daycares tied to churches and other institutions. Here, we're just a Tuesday, and I'm grateful for that. Okay, here's where I want to say something that I think gets lost in a lot of conversations about gay parenting. People forget that our son might be completely fine. And I don't just mean fine in the cautious way people sometimes say it, like, oh, I'm sure he'll be okay, with this little undertone as if everyone is already bracing for the hard part. But here's my actual position. I think he might just thrive. I don't mean that our family is perfect or that being a two-dad family means our son won't have hard questions. He definitely will. Every child has questions about who they are, where they come from, what made them, what shaped them. That's not a gay family problem. That's a human problem. Most research points in the same direction. Children in families like ours do just as well. And some studies suggest that the intentionality in LGBTQ+ families can be a real strength. But honestly, I don't want to turn our son into a research argument. I just want people to understand that there is no automatic damage here. A traditional family structure can be beautiful. A mother and a father can give a child a loving, stable, deeply safe home. But the structure itself doesn't create love, safety, or emotional presence. The people in it do. Plenty of people grow up with a mother and a father and still don't get the emotional safety they needed. What matters is not just who is in the family photo, it's who shows up. Martin and I spent 3 years building this family on purpose, and we thought about many of these questions before they arrived. We didn't just stumble into this, we chose this with our eyes open. And that's not something I see as a disadvantage. That might actually be something our son gets to stand on. And look, I've heard the argument, a child needs a mother. I've heard it say kindly, and I've heard it said to hurt. And I just want to be honest about it rather than dismiss it, because sometimes that belief comes from something very real. A mother who wasn't there, or a mother who didn't show up in the way that someone needed, or a wound that made the idea of mother feel essential in a way that is hard to explain. I understand that. That's a real thing to carry. But you can't take your own experience and make it a rule for everyone else's family. I don't think that's fair. And at some point, it stops being an argument and starts being pain looking for somewhere to go. Of course, biology matters. Women are essential for birth. Obviously, we know that better than most. We lived it. But biology is also a wide and endlessly creative system. Nature is whatever gets the young ones to survive and grow. In our case, we used science, consent, and a relationship we took seriously from the beginning to create our family with two women who chose to help us. That feels pretty natural to me. And what we're trying to build is a family where honesty is normal from the beginning. We're trying to build a family where our son can ask questions and we don't panic, look away, or hide behind it's complicated, when what we really mean is, I don't want to answer that. We want our son to know our gestational carrier. We want him to know his genetic mother. We want him to know that Martin and I didn't just stumble into this. We worked for 3 years to get him specifically. And Martin and I believe, not hope, but really believe that we will be enough. We will get things wrong. We probably will, but we've been thinking about these questions since before our son could breathe, and we're not going to stop. So if you're watching this and you're in a non-traditional family, I'm curious, what's the question you've been preparing for? Or what's the question that came out of nowhere and caught you completely off guard? Drop it in the comments. I read every one of them and I would genuinely love to know. And if you're not in a gay family, but you've been thinking about what family actually means, what do you think matters more, structure or presence? I don't know what the right answer is for everyone. I just know what it is for us. And if this video was useful or made you think about something differently, a like really does help other people find it. And if you want to follow along as we figure this out in real time, please subscribe. We're just getting started. Thanks so much for watching and see you next time.